Alright, in this video, we're going to be introducing Chapter 5. And Chapter 5 is all about gases. Now, as you know, there are three main states of matter that we discuss in this class, and you might be wondering, why is it that we're focusing an entire chapter just on one of them? And sure enough, if you look in your table of contents of your textbook, you'll find that there's no chapter dedicated to solids, liquids, but there is one for gases. So let's look at why that is. So let's start off by looking at a solid microscopically. So if you look at a solid microscopically, you'd find that the particles that make it up are kind of aligned in a regular repeating pattern for the most part. Okay, and they're not moving past one another. That's not to say they're not moving at all. Each one of these individual particles is kind of shaking and vibrating around, but none of them are actually moving past one another. Okay, so that's the nature of solids. Now, if you add some heat to a solid, then you're going to add energy, and that energy is going to allow the particles to kind of break away from one another. Not entirely, though. Not like they're completely separating. It's just that they no longer have these kind of regular repeating patterns. Also, they're able to move past one another. Okay, which is what allows liquids to flow. Okay, so one particle can make its way from one side of a container all the way to the other. And then if we add a little bit more energy, we see that the particles completely separate from one another. Okay, so they have a ton of space between each other, and for the most part, they don't contact one another. Now, that's not to say they may not occasionally maybe bump into one another, but when they do, they just bounce right off and continue on. So they're kind of zooming about here, sometimes colliding with the walls of the container, sometimes colliding with other gas particles. Okay, so that's the nature of a gas. And the big thing that separates the two of these, separates gases from the two other states of matter, is that simply the particles are not in contact with each other on a regular basis. For that reason, we call solids and liquids condensed phases. Okay, in other words, the particles are right next to each other. You can't even squeeze them together further if you wanted to. We call that compressibility. So solids and liquids are not compressible. Okay, whereas gases are. Okay, so these properties, okay, are the foundation for why gases behave so differently from solids and liquids. Now, in this chapter, we're going to dig into this a lot deeper than what I've done here. But for now, we're just going to kind of pause here, and we'll move on to the next video.